The storm was alive, its breath sharp like knives, its voice louder than thunder. Snow and ice swirled in every direction, covering the world in white. It was the kind of storm that swallowed whole villages, the kind of storm where even strong men lost their way and never returned. Through that storm, a lone human walked, his boots sinking into deep snow with every heavy step. His coat was torn at the edges, and the cold bit through the fabric into his skin. Still, he pressed forward, his eyes narrow against the freezing wind. He had traveled these lands before, but never had he seen the storm this wild. Every gust pushed against him like a wall, making it hard to breathe. His scarf was soaked with frost, ice clung to his beard. His hands were numb though he tried to move them inside his gloves. Yet he walked, step by step, one thought in his mind. If he stopped, he would freeze where he stood. The silence between the screams of the storm was strange. It was a silence that felt heavy, and inside that silence, something faint reached his ears at first. He thought it was only the wind playing tricks, but then he heard it again, a small sound, a weak sound. It was a cry. He stopped, his boots planted in the snow. He turned his head, listening hard. Yes, there it was, a tiny cry almost swallowed by the storm. It was not the cry of an animal. It was the cry of someone small and helpless. His heart quickened. He followed the sound, pushing through snow drifts that reached his knees. Each step was heavy, but the cry guided him, growing weaker, more desperate. Finally, in the shadow of a broken tree half buried in ice, he saw her. She was tiny, curled up against the frozen ground, her skin pale and glowing faintly under the snow, her body shaking like a leaf in the wind. She was no human child. Her limbs were thinner, her eyes larger. Her skin carried a faint shimmer like frost but alive. The human dropped to his knees, brushing the snow away. Her lips were blue, her breathing shallow. She was close to death. He looked around, but there was no one else, no parents, no guardians, no footprints in the storm. She had been left here to die. For a moment, he hesitated. The storm screamed louder, warning him, reminding him that he had little food, little strength. Saving her could mean his own end. But when he looked at her trembling form, his heart made the choice before his mind. He pulled her into his arms. She was light, lighter than any human child. As if she was made of air and frost, she whimpered softly, her tiny hands trying weakly to grip his coat. He pressed her close against his chest, sharing his warmth, his breath fogging around them. "You're not dying here," he muttered, his voice rough against the wind. Though she could not understand his words, something in her faint eyes showed she understood his meaning. He searched the horizon. The storm made it impossible to see far, but he knew there had been an old hunter's shelter not far from here. Maybe broken, maybe useless, but it was their only chance. Tightening his grip, he stood again, carrying her against the raging storm. The journey was torture. Every step was like dragging chains through ice. The wind tried to rip the child from his arms, but he held her tighter, his muscles burning, his breath coming hard. Her head rested against his chest, and he felt how weak her pulse was, every beat slower than the last. Finally, through the blur of snow, he saw it. A half-collapsed wooden hut leaning against a frozen rock, its roof broken, its walls cracked, but it was better than nothing. He kicked the door open, the wood snapping under his boot. Inside was dark and cold, but at least the wind was weaker. He laid the child on the ground and quickly sear. The hut shook under the storm, every blast of icy wind pushing against its broken walls. The man pressed his back to the wood, trying to block the cracks where snow slipped inside. The fire flickered weakly, fighting to survive just like them. He turned to the child. She was lying close to the fire, but her body still shook. Her small frame seemed too fragile, as if one more gust of wind could break her apart. He pulled off his thick coat and wrapped her in it, shivering as the cold bit deeper into his own skin. Her glowing eyes half opened, faint but alive. She whispered something, words soft and broken. He did not understand the language, but the sound of it carried fear and pain. He placed a hand gently on her forehead, his touch rough but careful. and she closed her eyes again, her trembling slowing. The fire hissed, wood cracking, smoke curling up into the roof. He fed it more scraps, tearing apart an old chair with his knife. Each spark of flame meant another minute of life for the child. But his own supplies were running low. His bag held only a little food, a little water, not enough for two. He drank one sip, then gave the flask back to her, lifting her head so she could swallow. She took the water in tiny gulps, and when she was done, her hand stayed on his, holding weakly, as if she feared that if she let go, the storm would take her. His chest tightened. He had seen soldiers die on battlefields, but this small grip of trust was heavier than all of that. Outside, the storm screamed louder, and then came another sound. A sound that did not belong to the wind. It was low, rumbling, like a growl carried across the snow. The man's eyes narrowed, his hand instinctively moving to his rifle leaning by the wall. The child stirred, her eyes wide, as if she knew the sound. She whispered something again, clutching his arm tighter, her voice shook with fear. He did not know the words, but he understood the meaning. Danger was near. He stood, the rifle heavy in his hands, the firelight flickering across his face. Shadows moved outside the cracks in the hut. Shapes too large for any human, beasts built for this storm, hunters of the frozen dark. Snow pressed harder against the door, and then, a thud, the wood groaned, something pushed against it, the child whimpered. He moved quickly, placing himself between her and the door, rifle raised, his breath slow and steady. The door shook again, claws scraping against it. He fired through the gap, the sound exploding in the small hut. The recoil kicking against his shoulder. A beast outside roared in pain, stumbling back into the snow, but the growls multiplied, circling, hungry. The child's eyes glowed faintly. She whispered a single word, her tiny fingers lifting weakly, and for a brief moment, the fire flared, brighter than before. The beasts outside snarled, pulling back, shadows retreating from the sudden light. The man turned to her in shock, his heart racing. What was this power? What kind of child was she? He knelt beside her, staring into those strange glowing eyes. She was too weak to speak more, but her tears glimmered as they fell, and he knew she carried secrets far heavier than her small body. The beasts did not give up. Their growls echoed as they circled the hut, scratching at the walls, testing the weakness of the broken shelter. Every sound made the child flinch. She pressed herself against him, hiding her face in his chest. He held her close, his eyes fixed on the door. The firewood was running low, the flames shrinking. His mind raced. He could not fight the beasts forever. He could not let the fire die, and he could not abandon her. He tore apart the last piece of wood, tossing it into the fire. It crackled brighter for a moment. Pushing the shadows back, the beasts growled, but did not break in, waiting patient like wolves circling prey. The man whispered, more to himself than her. "We'll make it through this night." His voice low, steady. Even though his hands shook, the child tilted her head, her glowing eyes soft, as if she believed him. Hours crawled like days, the storm screamed, the beasts lingered, but the fire lived, and so did they. The man fought sleep, knowing if he closed his eyes, the flames might die, the beasts might enter, and the child might slip away. Finally, as dawn's first gray light touched the cracks in the walls, the growls faded, the shadows outside retreated into the storm. The beasts were gone. For now, the man's shoulders dropped, heavy with exhaustion, but he kept watch, his rifle across his lap, the child wrapped in his coat. Her breathing was steadier now, her small chest rising and falling against him. She slept, safe for the moment, her hands still clutching his. Even in dreams, he looked at her. This alien child who should have been a stranger. But in one night, she had become something else, something he could not name. The fire burned low, his supplies nearly gone, the hut broken and weak, and he knew the storm was not finished. This was only a pause, and more dangers waited in the snow. The wind was calmer when morning came, but calm did not mean safety. The snow still fell in thick sheets, soft at first glance, deadly underneath. The man sat near the fire, his rifle across his knees, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. The child lay close to him, wrapped in his coat, her faint glow softer now, no longer flickering like a dying candle, her breathing steadier, but her body still weak. He stared at her for a long time, wondering who she was, and why her own people had left her in the storm. He reached for his bag, checking supplies almost gone, a little bread, a little water, barely enough for himself, certainly not enough for two. But he did not think twice when she stirred awake. He handed her the food. She took tiny bites, looking at him with wide eyes, and though she said nothing, the gratitude was clear. The hut groaned in the wind. The fire hissed as smoke rose through the broken roof. Outside, the storm had changed its voice, softer but more dangerous, because in that silence he heard it. The growl again, low, deep, close. The child froze, her hand gripping his arm, her glowing eyes wide. She whispered something, one word, sharp with fear. He could not understand it, but he knew what it meant. They had come back. He stood slowly, moving to the door, rifle raised. His breath steady though his heart pounded, through the cracks in the wall. He saw shadows shifting in the snow, large shapes moving low to the ground, too many to count. The beasts had not given up. They had only been waiting for the storm to weaken. One beast pressed close to the wall, its claws scraping against the wood. The sound like metal on stone. The child whimpered, hiding behind him. The man lifted the rifle. Aiming through the gap, he fired, the blast echoing in the small hut. Snow exploded outside. A beast roared, falling back, but the others did not run. They circled, growling, their yellow eyes glowing in the storm. They were hungry, and they wanted what was inside. The man reloaded quickly, but his bullets were few. He knew he could not waste them. The beasts were patient, clever, waiting for him to slip, waiting for the fire to die. Then something unexpected happened. The child stepped forward, her small body shaking, her hand raised, her eyes glowing brighter than before. She whispered a word in her strange tongue, soft but powerful. The fire in the hut flared, flames rising high, casting long shadows. The beasts outside snarled, pulling back, their growls sharper. They feared the light. The man turned to her in shock, the glow in her eyes stronger, her skin faintly marked with patterns of light. She collapsed back against him, exhausted, her glow dimming again. He caught her before she fell, holding her close, his mind racing. She was no ordinary child. She had power, something alive inside her, something the beasts feared, but also something dangerous. The hut shook again, claws raking against the wood. The man tightened his grip on the rifle, whispering to himself, "Not today." His voice steady, his finger on the trigger. The door burst open, snow and claws crashing inside. A beast lunged, its mouth wide, rows of jagged teeth gleaming. The man fired point blank, the blast shaking the walls. The beast fell back with a howl, blood staining the snow, but two more pressed against the opening, their eyes burning with hunger. The man stood his ground, the child clutching his leg, her faint light flickering like a shield. For hours it seemed endless, the beasts testing, attacking, pulling back, again and again. The man's arms ached from firing, his shoulders heavy, but he did not give up. Each shot drove them back, each growl met with steel and fire. Finally, as the day turned to dusk, the beasts retreated, their shapes fading into the storm, their growls echoing in the distance. They had not been defeated, only delayed, waiting for another chance. The man dropped against the wall, sweat freezing on his face, his hands shaking. The child pressed against him, her tiny hands holding his arm. She whispered something soft, and though he did not understand the words, he understood the meaning. "Thank you." The fire burned low, the last of the wood crackling. He knew they could not stay here much longer. The hut was broken. His bullets were few, and the beasts would return. hungrier than before. He looked at the child, at the strange glow in her eyes, at the faint patterns on her skin. She was more than just a child lost in the storm. She was something rare, something her people had abandoned. But why, he wondered, what was she, and why did the beasts fear her? The storm outside grew darker again. The wind howled like a voice, carrying sounds not only of snow but of machines. A faint hum in the distance, unnatural. The child stirred, her eyes wide again. She whispered urgently, her voice filled with fear. She pointed out into the storm, and he followed her gaze. Through the falling snow, he saw them, lights, moving in a line. Not the glow of fire, not the eyes of beasts, but searchlights, scanning the land. Machines crawling across the frozen waste. His blood ran cold. These were not hunters from the wild. These were patrols, alien soldiers, her people, the ones who had left her to die, and now they were searching for her again. The storm softened, but the danger grew heavier. The fire inside the hut was almost gone, smoke rising in thin curls. The man sat with the child in his arms, her small body wrapped in his coat, her faint glow flickering against the broken walls. He had fought the beasts, and he had kept her alive. But now, through the cracks in the wood, he saw something far worse, bright beams of light sweeping across the frozen ground, machines crawling like insects in the snow, and figures moving with strange weapons in their hands. The girl stirred, her wide glowing eyes looking at him. She whispered in her tongue, the sound fragile but filled with fear. Her tiny hands gripped his shirt as if begging him not to let go. He could not understand her words, but her tears told the truth. He leaned close, whispering softly, "I won't let them take you." His voice rough but steady. She blinked at him, and for a moment, her faint lips curved, not in a smile, but in trust. The fire snapped, and in the dim glow he noticed something strange. Her skin, under the dirt and frost, held faint patterns, like lines of light running across her arms and neck, pulsing slowly. They looked almost like markings carved by nature, but alive, shifting faintly with every breath she took. He frowned, brushing a bit of frost from her cheek. She turned her head slightly, ashamed, as if hiding her face. He realized then why she had been abandoned. She was different even among her own people, a child with a secret they feared. Outside, the patrol moved closer, their machines grinding against the ice. Their voices carried in the wind, harsh, commanding, their searchlights cutting through the storm. The man's muscles tensed. He knew if they found the hut, it would be over. The girl whispered again, her eyes glowing brighter, the markings on her skin pulsing faster. He held her shoulders gently, trying to calm her, but she shook her head, whispering one word he could not understand, and then he did not need to, for her meaning was clear. They were coming for her. He moved to the door, rifle in hand, peeking through the broken wood, his breath caught. Soldiers in dark armor scanned the snow, their weapons glowing faintly, not like human guns, more advanced, more deadly. He had faced beasts before, but this was different. He turned back, the girl's glow flickered, faint light spilling into the hut. He realized with dread that her glow could betray them. The machines outside might see it, track it. He quickly pulled his coat tighter around her, whispering sharply, "Stay still, stay quiet." She obeyed, pressing against his chest, her glow dimming under the thick fabric, her tiny hand still shaking. He stroked her head gently, trying to give her the comfort he could not even give himself. Minutes stretched like hours. The sound of metal feet crunching in the snow came closer, closer. The beams of light sweeping against the hut walls, shadows sliding across the cracks. The man held his breath, his finger tight on the trigger, his heart pounding in his ears. The patrol paused just outside, voices muttering in their strange tongue. He could not understand the words, but their tone was sharp, searching, commanding. The girl clung tighter, her glowing eyes staring at him in pure terror. Then something happened. Her eyes burned brighter for a moment, and suddenly he felt it. Not with his ears but in his mind. A soft voice, not his own, whispering inside his thoughts. It was her. "Please," the voice said, trembling. "Don't let them take me." His eyes widened, his grip on the rifle tightening. He looked down at her, shocked. She stared back, her lips not moving, but her voice echoing inside him, clear and desperate. He swallowed hard, whispering aloud, "I won't." And he meant it, with every part of his soul. The patrol outside lingered. One of the soldiers stepped closer. The snow creaked under heavy boots. The man raised his rifle slowly, ready to fire if the door opened. But just before the soldier reached the wall, a roar echoed in the distance. The beasts, they had returned. Their growls thundered through the storm. The soldiers shouted, turning their weapons outward, beams of energy lighting the snow. The patrol broke formation, distracted, firing into the shadows as the beasts attacked. The man pulled the girl closer, whispering urgently, "Now's our chance." He slipped out the back of the hut, snow biting at his legs. The girl pressed against his chest, her faint glow hidden under the coat. He moved quickly through the storm, keeping low, the gunfire and roars covering their escape. They reached a ridge of broken rocks, crouching behind it. The man peeked over, watching as the soldiers fought the beasts. Light clashed against shadow, claws against steel, blood staining the snow, the storm hiding their screams. The girl stirred again, whispering in his mind, faint and weak, "They will never stop. They will keep hunting." Her voice cracked with sorrow. He looked at her, his jaw tight. "Then we keep running," he whispered back. Her eyes glowed softly, brighter than before, and she whispered one last thought into his mind. "You shouldn't save me, I am cursed." But her small hand still held tightly onto his, refusing to let go. He pulled her close, his voice low, steady. "Cursed or not, you're mine to protect now." The storm had hidden them for a while, but nothing in the frozen wasteland stayed hidden for long. The man crouched behind the ridge of rocks, the child pressed against his chest, her faint glow hidden under his coat, his breath slow and heavy in the cold air. Below, the battlefield raged, beasts tearing through armored soldiers, energy blasts lighting the snow, claws ripping through steel, the cries of both sides mixing with the howl of the storm. It was chaos, chaos that gave him one chance to escape. He whispered to the girl, "Hold on to me, don't make a sound." Her glowing eyes lifted to his, wide and fearful. She nodded faintly, her small hands gripping his shirt with all the strength she had. He moved, keeping low, his boots crunching in the snow, every sound swallowed by the screams and roars behind them. He climbed along the ridge, carrying her as carefully as he could, the cold biting deeper into his bones. But his mind focused only on one thought, get her away. For a time, it worked. The storm covered their tracks. The sounds of battle kept the soldiers distracted. But fate was cruel. As he reached the other side of the ridge, a flash of light cut across the snow. A beam from above, sharp and searching. He froze, his heart pounding. The beam swept closer, touching the rocks near them. The girl whimpered softly, and he pressed a hand gently over her mouth, whispering, "Shoo, stay still." Her tears slipped silently down her face, but she obeyed. The beam passed, moving on, but it was too late. A soldier had spotted the faint glow leaking from his coat. A shout rose, sharp and commanding. Weapons hummed, boots thundered against the snow. The chase had begun. He cursed under his breath, running now, snow exploding under his boots, the child bouncing against his chest. He held her tightly, her tiny arms clinging around his neck. The storm whipped around them, but the lights followed, beams cutting through the white. Shots fired, burning the air. Energy blasts struck the ground near his feet, throwing up clouds of steam. He weaved left, then right, his lungs burning, his legs screaming. But he did not stop. The girl's faint voice trembled in his mind. "They won't stop. They'll never stop." He ignored the pain, ignored the storm. He ran toward the cliffs, jagged stone rising from the snow. If he could reach them, maybe he could lose them in the shadows, maybe. The soldiers closed in, their voices sharp, the hum of their weapons louder. One shot hit the rocks near him, spraying shards of stone across his cheek. Blood mixed with the snow. The girl gasped, her glow flickering under the coat. He slid behind a boulder, panting, his breath clouding the air. The child clung to him, whispering faintly, "Please don't let them take me." Her voice inside his mind, trembling. He pressed his forehead against hers, whispering back, "They won't. Not while I breathe." He peeked out. The soldiers moved fast, their armor glowing faintly in the snow, their weapons ready. He gritted his teeth, lifting his rifle, the metal heavy in his frozen hands. He fired, one shot, two shots. One soldier fell, the others ducked, returning fire, blasts shaking the rocks. The girl's hands pressed against his chest, her glow brightening suddenly. She whispered in his mind again, "I can help." He shook his head. "No, you're too weak." But her eyes glowed brighter, fierce despite her fear. Before he could stop her, she raised one hand from under the coat. A small spark of light flared, bursting into the snow, blinding the soldiers for a moment. They shouted, shields raised. The man seized the chance, grabbing her hand and running again, deeper into the cliffs. The storm screamed, wind whipping his face, but he pushed forward, rocks towering above him. The path narrowing, soldiers chasing behind, their lights cutting through the darkness. His heart pounded, every breath a knife in his chest. But he kept running, kept holding her. They reached a narrow pass, stone walls closing in on both sides. He stumbled, nearly falling. The girl cried out, her voice breaking the silence. The soldiers heard, shouts echoed closer, weapons humming. He pressed his back to the stone, rifle raised, his body trembling with exhaustion. He couldn't run much longer. He couldn't keep firing forever. But surrender was not an option. Not with her. The girl tugged on his shirt, her eyes glowing fiercely. She whispered inside his mind, "If they take me, they kill you too. We must fight." Her voice small but certain. He looked down at her, so tiny, so fragile, yet braver than most soldiers he had known. He nodded slowly, pressing his lips against her forehead, whispering, "Then we fight together." The soldiers' lights grew brighter, their boots crunching closer. The man gripped his rifle, his finger on the trigger, his body ready. The girl's glow spread, markings on her skin burning brighter. The storm itself seemed to bend around her light. The soldiers rounded the corner, weapons raised, voices sharp, ordering him to surrender. His jaw tightened, his arms steady. The girl pressed her forehead against his chest, whispering her last words before the clash. "Don't let go of me." The narrow pass shook with echoes, the sound of boots crunching against ice, the hum of strange weapons glowing through the storm. The man stood with his back against the cliff, rifle in hand. The child pressed close to his chest, her small body trembling but her glowing eyes fierce. The soldiers advanced slowly, their voices sharp in their alien tongue, demanding surrender. Their lights cut through the snow, shining directly on him. He raised his rifle higher, his breath steady though his heart pounded like a drum. He knew he could not win, but he would not bow. The commander stepped forward, tall and armored, his mask gleaming under the stormlight. His weapon pointed at the man's head, his voice low and certain. Even though the words were foreign, the meaning was clear. Give up the child or die. The girl clung to him tighter, whispering inside his mind, "Please don't let them take me." Her small voice broke with fear, her glow flickering as her tears froze on her cheeks. The man's jaw tightened, his arms wrapping around her. "Never," he whispered back. The commander raised his hand. The soldiers prepared to fire. The man's rifle felt heavy, his body weak. He had little chance. He thought of running, of hiding. But there was no place left. There was only one choice. His fingers slid onto the trigger. He aimed straight at the commander. Ready to fight. Ready to die. The girl's glow brightened suddenly, spilling through the storm. The markings on her skin burned with light. She pressed her forehead against his chest, whispering, "Don't leave me." The commander shouted an order. Weapons hummed louder, ready to unleash death. But before the first shot fired, the girl raised her tiny hand, her glow bursting like fire. The storm twisted around them, wind and snow whipping in a spiral, blinding the soldiers. The man shielded her with his body. The blast of light burned his skin. But he did not let go. He gritted his teeth, holding her tighter. Her power flared, forcing the soldiers back, their lights breaking, their armor cracking, their voices shouting in panic. The commander staggered, his mask glowing with cracks of light. He raised his weapon and fired blindly. The blast missed, striking the cliff, sending stone crashing down. The man stumbled, shielding the child from falling rocks, his rifle slipping from his hands. The soldiers regrouped, shouting, firing into the storm of light. Their beams collided with her glow, sparks exploding across the snow. The man grabbed his rifle again. Firing blindly, one soldier fell, another staggered, but more pushed forward. The girl's glow wavered, her tiny body shaking, her strength fading. She clung to him desperately, her voice inside his mind weak. "I can't hold it. I'm too small." He cupped her face with his rough hands, his eyes steady. "Then I'll hold it with you." She blinked at him, her glowing eyes wide, and for the first time, she smiled, faint but real. The commander shouted again, raising his weapon. The soldiers moved in. The man stood tall, rifle shaking in his hands, his back against the cliff, the girl's glow burning against his chest. They were cornered, no escape. He thought of laying down his weapon, of begging for mercy, but the memory of her voice stopped him. The way she had whispered, "Please don't let them take me." The way her small hands had clung to him in the storm. No, surrender was not an option. He raised the rifle, firing again. The blast striking the commander's mask, sparks flying. The commander stumbled but did not fall. The soldiers fired back, beams tearing through the snow. One grazed his arm, blood splattering. His teeth clenched, but he held his ground. The girl screamed, not with her mouth but with her light. Her markings burned like fire. Her glow exploded outward, a wave of pure energy knocking soldiers back. Some fell to the snow. Their armor shattered, others ran, blinded, their weapons dead. The commander stood against the glow, his armor cracking, his voice roaring. He raised his weapon again. Aiming for the child, the man stepped in front, his arms wide, his body ready to take the blast. The commander fired. The beam struck him in the chest. Pain seared through his body. He staggered, nearly falling. The child cried out, her glow blazing brighter than ever before. The storm itself roared with her, snow and ice lifting into the air. The light spread across the cliffs, swallowing everything. The commander screamed as his armor shattered completely. His body thrown into the storm, his voice fading. The remaining soldiers fled, retreating into the snow, their voices fading in panic, their lights vanishing into the storm. The pass fell silent again. Only the howl of the wind remained. The man collapsed to his knees, his body shaking, blood staining his chest. The child pressed her tiny hands against him, glowing faintly, whispering in his mind, "Don't leave me. Please don't leave." He smiled weakly, his hand brushing her hair. "Not yet." The storm calmed, the snow falling softer, the cliffs glowing faintly from her light. The man held her close, his body broken but his spirit unshaken. He had made his choice, to fight, not for himself, but for her. The storm had broken, the night was ending. Pale light spilled slowly across the frozen cliffs, painting the world in shades of silver and gray. The man sat with his back against the rocks, his rifle beside him, the child curled in his arms, her glow faint but steady. His chest burned with pain, the wound from the commander's weapon still raw, blood stiffening on his torn clothes, but he ignored it. His eyes fixed on the horizon, The storm was quiet now, too quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The child stirred, her glowing eyes opening slowly. She looked up at him, whispering inside his mind, "You are hurt." Her small hands touched his chest, warm despite the cold. He gave a faint smile, his voice rough. "I've been hurt before." But her eyes filled with tears, as if she did not believe him. She pressed her forehead against his, her glow spreading faintly across his skin, warm like fire. He felt the pain lessen for a moment. Not gone, but softer. She pulled back, exhausted, her breath shaky. "I can't heal much." Her voice trembled. He shook his head, brushing her hair gently. "You did enough." The snow around them shimmered in the early light, broken armor scattered across the ground. The bodies of soldiers half buried in white. The commander was gone, swallowed by the storm. But the man knew this was not the end. More would come, more would hunt. The child looked at him, her glowing eyes wide, her voice soft in his mind. "They will chase me forever, because of what I am." He tightened his arms around her, whispering aloud, "Then they'll have to chase me too." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the wind gentle now, the world calm. But under that calm, danger waited. He stood slowly, his body weak but his grip strong. He lifted the child onto his back, her small arms wrapping around his neck, her face pressing into his shoulder. He looked out at the frozen land, endless snow stretching in every direction. And he chose a path, away from the cliffs, away from the hut, away from death. They moved slowly at first, each step heavy, his legs screaming with pain. But the warmth of the child's small body kept him moving, her faint glow guiding them like a lantern in the storm. Hours passed, the sun climbed higher, the snow glittered, but the land was empty. No soldiers, no beasts, only silence. It felt almost peaceful, almost safe. But he knew better. Safety was an illusion. As they reached a rise in the land, he saw it. A distant structure, small and broken, but human-made, an outpost, abandoned maybe, but still standing. His heart lifted. Maybe they could rest. Maybe they could survive another day. The child stirred, following his gaze, her glowing eyes soft with hope. "A home?" she whispered in his mind. He smiled faintly. "Not much of one, but better than the storm." They reached it by nightfall, the walls cracked, the roof half broken. But inside there was shelter, old supplies, rusted tools, even a half-working heater. The man set her down gently, starting a small fire with what would he found. Warmth filled the room. The child curled beside him, her eyes watching him silently. As the fire grew, he looked at her small glowing form, her strange markings faint against her skin. He finally asked, softly, "What are you, really?" She looked down, ashamed. "A mistake," she whispered inside his mind. His chest tightened. "No," he said firmly. "You're a child, that's all that matters." Her eyes lifted, wide and wet. "They said I was cursed, that my power would bring ruin?" He reached out, lifting her chin gently. "Or maybe your power will save someone, maybe it already has." She blinked, tears falling, then pressed herself into his chest, whispering, "Then let me stay, please." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. "You already have a place, right here." His voice rough but steady. She clung to him, her glow warm against his heart. The night passed slowly, the storm outside whispering against the walls. The man kept watch, his rifle close, but his eyes often rested on the child. Asleep against him, peaceful for once. When dawn came again, he stepped outside, the air sharp but calm, the snow glowing under the rising sun. The world looked different, not safe, not easy, but new, full of choices, full of paths. The child joined him, standing barefoot in the snow, her glow shimmering softly in the morning light. She slipped her small hand into his, whispering in his mind, "Father." His breath caught, his chest heavy, but he did not pull away. He squeezed her hand, whispering, Daughter. For the first time in years, he felt something stronger than fear, stronger than pain. He felt purpose, not as a soldier, not as a wanderer, but as a protector and maybe someday as family,